What if I told you there was a servant who was easy to get, easy to level, easy to NP5, and hits like a nuclear bomb? Sounds like a pretty good deal, right? Well, that servant is Arash, and you're probably sitting on 20 right now, if you haven't fed them all to Robin Hood. But before you pump him up with steroids, there's something you should know. He sorta has a dying problem. You see, Arash does apocalyptic levels of damage, but it's all tied to his noble phantasm. Stella has a very unusual demerit that kills Arash when he uses it. What this means is that if you're making a chain with his noble phantasm, all of your Arash cards should be placed before it. Otherwise, he's not going to be around to use them. Now, you might think being able to kill yourself on demand isn't the most useful thing in the world. But believe it or not, there's actually an application for this. Without the plug suit mystic code, you can't really interact with your backline servants. They just mosey on in as your frontline dies. Oh, I'm sorry, did I say mosey? I meant stutter and lag. Sorry to say that part of the fake Grand Order experience isn't going to change from knowing this trick. But with Arash you can reliably plan around encounters with your first 4 servants, instead of just your frontline. On JP for instance, I run a daily quest team with Arash, Darius, and Waver, with Cha-Cha on the backline for a 3-turn clear. On NA you can actually make this if you switch out Cha-Cha for Tomcat or Lancelot. I just use her because Chaldea lunchtime dictates half of my decisions in this game. My deck does the other half. Regardless, this method obviously requires you to have some premium resources. You can control for Waver if you reroll, but your damage dealers need, at minimum, 2 craft essences that give 80% charge, and 1 that gives 50. That's a tough sell to begin with, but unless you're rolling in kaleidoscopes, Arash will need to provide 20% of the bar himself. On JP he can do this, with a handy little skill. Unfortunately, that skill in his NP upgrade came in a later buff, and you won't be seeing them until Camelot comes along. Until then, you're stuck with a very awkward servant who isn't good for much aside from farming hands, and only on specific days to boot. But since I brought it up, let's talk about Camelot for a second. Arash shows up in a boss encounter, and they took away his meter. They actually put him on suicide watch. Didn't stick, of course. He shows up twice in Neurofest 3, aka the one where Lightworks got sick of our shit. The first time around he's in a free quest, where you can ask him to show you his Slugger Law impression. The second time though, he brought extra lies and invulnerability piercing, in case you wanted to set him up on a date with the Queen. I cleared that challenge quest, but I brought Roach Dog along, and he was a little too good at his job. Almost caused a wipe just by being there. Also, fun fact, if Arash kills you on the same turn he dies, it counts as your defeat. Now that I've gotten Storytime out of the way, let's talk strategy. Arash's card set features an Arts Buster split, which is very unfortunate since you can't even use him as a crit battery. Not a good one anyway. Also, unless your name is Paul Bunyan, Buster card damage on 1-star servants is a bit lacking. That just leaves the Arts route, which is fraught with pitfalls like playing the slow game with Arts chains from 0 charge. Also, don't be seduced by his overcharge numbers. That 2000% damage might look amazing, but you're gonna have to babysit his ass to get anywhere close to 500% charge. Best case scenario? You get him to 300, and then pop Stella at the end of a triple NP chain to get the other 200%. And what exactly would you accomplish by doing this? You've made suboptimal turns with him doing Arts chains, or feeding Arash crit stars, blown several full Waver rotations, protected him from getting mauled by trash mobs, and somehow found an encounter with enemies beefy enough to generate that charge, but also not strong enough to rip your do-nothing team apart. Or, God forbid, you've blown 3 command seals with this shit, just to hit the boss hard once. Or realistically, given those requirements, you'd be annihilating the good guy abomination in Babylonia. Worthy fucking cause. Also at this point, I'd like to remind you that it's 2000% of Arash's attack value, among other things, which is a paltry 5.8k without steroids. It's not a fair comparison, but just as a frame of reference, Arturia is packing 11k. This makes grailing him a tempting, though supremely wasteful proposition. My point is that even with 2000% damage, Arash is a questionable finisher, mostly since you have to put up with his shit until the final encounter. It's a meme. You do it once to prove you can, and move on with your life. Skill-wise, this guy's all over the place. Skill 3 generates charge, and while it's the most useful of the 3, we won't be seeing it for a while. Skill 1 is a defense buff with a useless side effect, since poison only matters in long battles, and you don't use Arash for those. It's okay if you need some room to build meter, but irrelevant for his optimal use case. And finally, Skill 2 lets him generate more crit stars, which is a sick joke, considering his single quick card. But enough about that. Let's talk equipment. Some people might tell you to run Guts on him, or even Necromancy if they're feeling frisky. But by doing this, you'd be double dipping into Arash's weakness. You can't treat him like a glass cannon, a resource to protect and cherish. You have to treat him like a grenade. Pull the pin, and get the fuck out of there. Now, as far as craft essences go, the gold standard is Kaleidoscope. And unless you have one, you shouldn't even consider using Arash with any regularity. Though if you have access to a Waver, Dragon's Meridian or Imaginary Element could suffice. Going back to the Overcharge fantasy, I'm not going to tell you to use Heaven's Feel or the Black Grail, because those are memes, but there is one card that can make it work. Demonic Bodhisattva. In case you're curious about the picture, Ms. Kara says Shoin is about to grab humankind by the pussy. But beyond portraying the sexual tension between a celestial body and a giant demon nun, this craft essence gives a bit of starting charge. And, more importantly, 200% extra overcharge once per quest. Obviously that one-time caveat doesn't matter, since we're dealing with Arash in his fatal refractory period. In short, you run him with 2 quick chargers like Waver and Media, get them all to 100%, and then go to town. Sounds pretty good, right? The meme became reality. Well, here's the catch. We're not seeing Demonic Bodhisattva for a long time. Really, that's a trend you see with a lot of these bad, older servants. The things you need to make them work are all locked behind future updates. We can talk about how useful he's going to be in the distant future, but right here and right now, he's a terrible investment, and you'd be hard-pressed to get mileage out of him without bending over backwards. In short, put him on your front line with Kaleidoscope, and remove an encounter from whatever quest you're on. He'll die, cycle someone more useful in, and you're good to go. This is the optimal use case. Don't buy into his crit and overcharge builds, because in both cases you're getting modest results for the sheer effort required to make them work. It's inefficient. It's the tail wagging the dog, pure and simple. They might change things up and release his buffs ahead of schedule on NA, but I wouldn't plan around that possibility. For the time being, leave Arash to his memes and focus elsewhere. Robin Hood, Emiya, and Uriel will each give you better returns on your investment until Camelot rolls around. And even then you're gonna need a strong Uriel. Let me tell you that right now. Fuckface Knight is not a fun fight without her. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, bombs like, subscribe, and show it to your friends who don't know any better. In any case...
Enemy nuke incoming! It's over!